keeps control for Thompson. Keeps control for Thompson. Pass receiving's wide open underneath in the basket. Great pass.
Backs down, now kicks out up top to the left side. Caden Dahl. Dahl hesitates, then takes the three and knocks it home good. Dahl to get the turn. Carr trying to keep those legs underneath. Then Cassette gets him down, and there's the pin.
Rebounded by Kendra Severson. Severson, here comes Bevins back the other way. Bevins, little contact, roll it in, good for Elena Bevins, and we're tied.
Through and Zeller with an excuse me bump, and here goes Semp for takeoff.
Alston Telephone Company and R&J Broadcasting Incorporated is proud to present to you this broadcast on your live event.
And welcome into the finals of Speech to Persuade here on YourLiveEvent.com for the 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet. I'm James Martins, and these Persuade finals are presented by Dakota Heritage Bank of Hillsboro, sharing our heritage, sharing our future, with locations in North Dakota and Minnesota, dhbankind.com. Here are the finalists for Persuade. Simon Zickman from Park River area, Ava Schlabs from West Fargo High School, Charlie Taylor of Grafton, Charlotte Lovejoy of West Fargo Horace, Nora Ailts of West Fargo Horace, Georgia Evenson from Grafton, Sullivan Dwyer of West Fargo High School, and Hannah Stevermer from West Fargo Horace. Our first speaker is Simon Zickman.
But what does strength training actually mean? And can you do it by just using your body weight, or do you need loads of fancy, expensive equipment to get started? If I only convince you of one thing about strength training today, let it be this. There are a few types of movement that will provide you with more benefits than strength training. Today, I will define for you what is strength training, how strength training builds muscle, and the benefits achieved from doing it. The phrase strength training is used as an umbrella term for all exercise that requires the body to resist weight in a variety of forms, and as a result is also referred as resistance training. This weight can come in a variety of forms. It could simply be your own body weight as you perform a push-up, pull-up, lunge, or squat. It could be an inexpensive option like resistant bands to provide resistance when you are stretching. Finally, there are the more traditional means which we are associated with strength training, such as free weights like barbells or dumbbells, and the weight machines that you might see in a weight room or a fitness gym. According to Mayo Clinic's website on strength training builds muscle through the principle of progressive overload. Repetitions of strength training activities needed to be completed to the point of being challenged for your muscles while maintaining good technique. In other words, you need to take your muscles you are working to fatigue, meaning you cannot lift another rep. A day of rest should be taken between exercising each specific muscle group. Slowly, over time, your body will adapt to the changes you are putting it through, which will require you to make changes to the training variables. This could include adjusting the amount of weight lifted, the number of reps or sets completed, amount of muscle rest time, or the range of movement to continue to challenge your muscles. If at any time a strength training exercise causes pain, stop the exercise. You could try it again in a few days or with a lower weight. The Department of Health and Human Services recommend you should do strength training for all major muscle groups at least 2 times a week. The benefit of strength training are significant. First, strength training helps you develop strong bones, according to the article in Men's Health on May 24th, 2023. By stressing your bones, strength training can increase bone density and reduce the risk of fractures and osteoporosis. Second, strength training can help you manage or lose weight. Dr. Jacob Erickson, a sports medicine physician at the Mayo Clinic, states that people working towards weight loss should engage in strength training because it raises their metabolic rate, prompting the body to continue burning calories for up to 3 days afterwards. Third, the National Institute of Aging deems strength training enhances your quality of life and improves your ability to do everyday activities. It helps protect your joints from injury, contributes to better balance and flexibility, and reduces your risk of falls. This can help you maintain your independence as you age. Finally, strength training helps manage chronic illness such as arthritis, back pain, obesity, heart disease, and diabetes by reducing abdominal fats and strengthening muscles. Also contributes to improved mental health too. A review in Current Sports Medicine Reports saw improvements in fatigue, anxiety, depression, self-esteem, pain management, and cognitive abilities in older adults. Not only will your body change physically from participating in strength training, but also psychologically, resulting in improved you. In conclusion, there's so much more to strength training than meets the eye. The goal of strength training should not be to have perfectly chiseled abs or perform exceptional feats of strength. Rather, by using weights to provide resistance to your body, you can train your body to become healthier over a time while achieving increased mental clarity. Strength training can help you live a better life and age gracefully. As the saying goes, you need to either lose it or use it. What will you choose?
Chickens. They're beautiful, fat little birds. They bring joy to people all over the world. They're adorable, silly, funny looking, and most people would say delicious. Though these are far more than enough reasons to convince anyone that a chicken is an amazing animal, there are somehow even more. If this animal is so perfect, why would you want to just admire them from a distance? You might as well raise your own chickens. No, I'm not joking. Everyone should own a chicken because they can supply you with food, they can fill your life with happiness, and they can even save the environment. So many people may see chickens as crusty little things with teeny bird brains that only poop out eggs and peck around all day. But chickens are so much more than that. Being around chickens has been proven to improve your mental health. Washington Post shares 2 studies that show that there are major benefits to being around birds. One of these studies had participants take a cognitive memory test while some listened to the sounds of birds and others listened to traffic noises. Then they were assessed by the test as well as their emotional states during the test. Those who listened to bird sounds showed a decrease in depressive symptoms, anxiety, and paranoia, while the traffic sounds actually worsened the feelings of depression. And both studies, as well as many more, have proven that just seeing birds and hearing their songs can improve the mood of both depressed and mentally healthy people, as well as reduce stress and feelings of paranoia. Now, these positive effects also apply to hearing chicken sounds. But the benefits don't end there. Chickens are very social and empathetic animals, and they actually enjoy interacting with each other and with humans. And this is why they have been shown to be amazing therapy animals. They have also been used to help people with PTSD, dementia, autism, and hypertension, as well as encourage communication for verbally disabled people and encourage people to have routine and responsibility. Walk Inuit is just one of many organizations who says this and uses chickens as some of their therapy animals. But you might ask, aren't most of those things that can be done by almost any therapy animal? Well, the answer to that is that though there are many animals that can have positive effects, chickens are especially suited to comfort humans and are often overlooked when it comes to their therapeutic abilities. But not only are chickens unique for their wonderful temperament and calming abilities, but they are also one of the few pets in the world that can supply you with a healthy meal daily. And I'm talking about, of course, eggs. The versatile, healthy, 100 ways to cook egg. The average chicken will lay from 250 to 300 eggs a year, which is almost 1 egg every day. And if you decide to have a small flock of about 4 chickens, this could mean that they are producing up to 12,000 eggs a year. And in other words, these eggs will quickly fill up your fridge and your diet, drastically reducing your grocery bill, as well as improving your health. WebMD lists the many benefits of eating eggs. One is that they're nutrient dense and contain vital amounts of high quality protein, phosphorus, vitamin B12, and antioxidants. Also, eggs are beneficial for your eyes, brain function, and cholesterol levels, and can even reduce your risk of heart disease. Furthermore, a Cambridge study shows that eggs from chickens who were given space to peck for food, instead of being kept in a small cage like most commercial chickens are raised, produce eggs that are more nutritious because they contain twice as much vitamin E and omega fatty 3 acids. So not only can you get this power-packed superfood for free, but you can get rid of your Uber Eats or Walmart delivery subscriptions because with a chicken, these eggs are made fresh in your own backyard. Now, if you still aren't convinced that you need a chicken as soon as possible, you might also need to hear that chickens are wonderful for the environment because there are still somehow more things that chickens are amazing at, and they are pooping and eating. Now, right off the bat, those sound like bad things, but you must remember that these are chickens we're talking about, and everything they do is wonderful in some way. And like I said, pooping and eating are no exception. Tilth Alliance, an organization dedicated to educating people about how they can grow their own healthy food, says that chicken poop is an amazing fertilizer and is preferable to other fertilizers because it contains more nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium than other manures. And chickens are omnivores and foragers, which means that they will happily dig through all your food waste and can even use it as their main diet, along with bugs they might find around your backyard. Now, that may sound like a lot of random, disjointed information, but what it altogether means is that with a chicken, you have a built-in fertilizer, pesticide, and trash can, all in one. That is also 100% better for the environment. So if you are anything like me, you're getting excited and can't wait for this speech to be over so you can start checking Tractor Supply for when they're getting some cute, fluffy little chicks again. But if you're a little bit more patient than I am, you might be thinking, how do I even raise a chicken? Well, I won't leave you wondering because it is actually very simple. Chickens are extremely hardy animals and can live with only a well-insulated as well as well-ventilated shelter that can be made out of anything from a barn to an old doghouse to something you made out of scrap wood from your garage. They will also need to have some clean water, a teeny bit of room to roam, and a food source, which, like I said before, can be made out of mostly your own leftovers. So, no matter who you are or how much time and money you have, a chicken is a good idea for you. If you have a brain and a body, just being around chickens will have an amazing and positive effect on your health. If you live in this world, you can improve it just by having a few birds in your backyard. So look past the KFC bucket and to your heart, where this feathered friend will surely grow close. And look to your home, where with the new invention of diapers for birds, your mind-boosting bestie will definitely end up. So if you're looking for a fabulous way to improve your life and change the world, get a chicken.
Classical music was turned on its head. A composer named Igor Stravinsky wrote The Rite of Spring, a loud and aggressive piece about nature that caused riots among the audience. Stravinsky fundamentally changed the ecosystem of music. Now it's time as we as humans steward the care of an actual ecosystem. We depend on nature to survive, but for far too long, we've been abusing the planet that sustains us. As our society has progressed economically, at the expense of degraded environment and violated its rights. Ultimately, we must learn to respect the inherent rights of nature. Just like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring changed the musical landscape of his time, let's transform how we treat nature. First, let's start with our key signature and how we can see that nature's rights are being violated and why it's a problem. Then, we'll articulate our notes when we look at the commodification of nature as harmful. And lastly, we'll crescendo when we realize and recognize how degrowth economics can work towards respecting the inherent rights of nature. Just as the key signature introduces the measure of music, let me introduce you to the problem. The biggest problem in our society is that we are polluting the environment and only seeing nature as profit, and profit only. Nature is being violated with pollutions of commodification of nature and other types. Many things that are useful to people create pollutions. Cars, they spew pollutants from their exhaust pipes. Burning coal to create electricity pollutes the air. Homes, industries produce garbage and sewage that pollute the land and water. Pesticides, chemical poisons used to kill weeds and insects pollute the land and water and seep into waterways that harm wildlife. Pollution is a global problem. Although urban areas are usually more polluted than the countryside, pollution can even spread to remote places where no people live. According to National Geographic, pesticides and other chemicals have been found in the Antarctic ice sheet. In the middle of the northern Pacific Ocean, a huge collection of microscopic plastic particles is forming what is known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. If we continue to pollute the environment, we won't have one left to gain resources from or to simply live in. We are no longer coexisting as partners with mutual help from one another, but we have completely violated that relationship and abused our environment, stealing from it. With a rise of deforestation and the extinction of many species of trees, we won't have any left to use as carbon dioxide and clear the air, but to also use as lumber. We simply will be out of trees. Over the last decade alone, the view on what land should be used for has changed significantly. Land is bought and sold consistently, regardless of history or who lives on it. For example, if indigenous people live on a piece of land and use that environment as a way to express their culture, this land can still be sold, notwithstanding their way of life or beliefs. From the author Asa Dearling, she states, natural spaces are sold off when they are deemed less profitable than proposed development, regardless of spiritual or cultural decisions. Now it's time to really articulate into the biggest causes of our environmental issues, The commodification of nature is using the environment as profit and overusing it until it's so violated it can no longer produce, then selling that land for cheap, regardless of spiritual or cultural reason. Companies have been proven to be spending billions of dollars with firms accused of destroying the tropical rainforest in Brazil. Global Witness says banks and asset managers based in the EU, UK, US, and China have been making deals worth of $157 billion going straight to the use of lumber, destroying tropical rainforests in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest. Cambridge University states, through the commodification of nature and the framing of the environment as a natural resource or ecosystem service has become increasingly prominent in the international environmental governance. The commodification of nature means it's a process of incorporating biophysical entities and or information into the economic system for the purpose of exchanging a good or service for profit. We are using nature no more as our homes or wildlife's homes, but for profit and profit only. Finally, it's time to crescendo towards a solution. The solution to our current circumstances is degrowth of the economy. Degrowth of the economy will help save nature and all that it stands for. If we don't slow down to some degree, we will lose the habitat we live in. Degrowth is when you slow or change the economic system to protect resources. In simpler terms, the well-being of nature and all that lives in it over money. This is not something people have been known to do, but it is something that we need to start doing again. Different policies have been made for years to try and make up the rights that have been violated. We need to stop violating so many rights, then we won't have to go and create so many different policies. Why make things harder and more unethical if we can keep it ethical and quick and easy? Degrowth of the economy will respect the inherent rights of nature. We won't need 100 different policies if we can just respect the land we live on, the land that feeds us, the land that we can co-work with to survive. Now one may think, yes, this would be easy in a perfect world. However, we don't live in a perfect world. Well, one only needs to look at Ecuador's constitution to see that they are on the right path. Ecuador was one of the first countries to include the rights of nature in their constitution, and they can't be the last. Article 72 says nature has a right to be restored in case severe or permanent environmental impact and measures to eliminate harmful environmental consequences. Article 73 is meant to prevent and restrict measures on the activities that might lead to extinction of species or harm of ecosystems. The more we're losing our ecosystems, the more of our economy and way of life we are losing too. Let's take the coda back to the beginning where we can get something that should be our first priority since it's where we live, what we feed off of, how we simply survive, has not been a priority. We need to change this to the degrowth of economy and respecting nature as well as its rights. Nature has never violated society's rights, and while it may not be able to communicate through voice, it has told us how it feels. Violated. Air pollution, the atmosphere is burning, and global warming is happening. Water pollution, the rivers are drying, and the fish are dying. There have been so many ways. Nature has told us it's hurt, and we cannot keep ignoring it. Just like Stravinsky changed the musical landscape of his time, let's change how we treat the environment.
To persuade you as to why the American school system desperately needs a reformation. I will do so first by going over how it deteriorates mental health, then I will go over the inefficiencies in how it teaches its students. Thirdly, I will list some potential improvements on how to better our school system for our students. Lastly, I will go over why it's such an important topic in the first place. So first, effects on overall health. According to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, lack of sleep is most common among high school students compared to any other age group. This can lead to a risk of overweightness, drug addiction, mental illness, and of course, poor academic performance. Now, it's no secret that teenagers often don't get enough sleep. What may be less obvious is how schools contribute to this lack of sleep. The CDC suggests between 8 and 10 hours of sleep a night. This leads to a major problem within the school system. They start too early. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, no school should start earlier than 8:30, yet the majority of schools in America do. I know what you're thinking. If students need more sleep at night, why don't they go to bed earlier? Well, there's a problem with that theory, that being something called their circadian rhythm, the 24-hour hormone cycle of the human body. This controls when you go to bed at night. According to the CDC, when a child hits puberty, their circadian rhythm is pushed forward multiple hours, to the point where asking a teenager to go to bed at 7 in the morning every morning is like asking the average adult to go to bed at 4 in the morning every morning. That's not the only problem with that theory. The second one being homework. Oftentimes, the large amount of homework given to students makes it very difficult for them to fall to bed early, especially if they need time to study or participate in things such as extracurricular activities, things that are incredibly vital to success in the academic field. That leads me to my second topic, problems in how it teaches its students. First of all, homework. In studies done by Stanford Research, it's been shown that homework, rather than actually helping students remember the information they're taught, more often fosters their dislikeness towards whatever they are learning in their homework. It's inefficient in teaching them, and it's inefficient in enforcing their principles. But that's not the main problem with the inefficiencies in the school system. The main one being the industrialization. According to the Montessorium, this current school system is modeled around obedience. That means following directions rather than speaking your mind. You may think that helps with an organized classroom. In reality, it is mostly harmful. That is because it often hinders creativity. This is because the industrial era fostered the current school system. That is when it was created, during a time when it needed to put out as many factory workers as possible, back when our values were following directions to a T and respecting the chain of command. These are no longer high values in society. Rather, our society cares about things like creativity, innovation, intuition. These are things that are failed to be fostered by the American school system. According to the same Stanford research as earlier, students who do go to schools with high amounts of homework and who have to follow rules, don't get to speak their mind, often experience an array of physical health problems, such as difficulty sleeping, lack of balance, susceptibility to illness, and even alienation from society. So solutions. One is simple. Push back school start times. According to the National Institute of Health, small delays in school start times, even as small as half an hour, result in significantly more and significantly better sleep. Secondly, limit homework. In the early 1900s in California, they passed a law stopping anyone before the age of 15 from having homework. Though before 1920, they had to rescind the law due to national pressure. That doesn't mean it wasn't successful, and often those students who did not experience the homework were significantly more happy, healthy, and had better grades overall than their counterparts with homework. Thirdly, we need to deindustrialize our school. Create a school environment that fosters the intuition and the creativity of the students. Rather than force feed them hundreds of useless facts that they don't need or want to know, teach them how to be curious, how to want to learn on their own, and the information will come to them. This is the reason why homeschoolers often do significantly better on state tests or state-regulated tests than public schoolers, because those homeschoolers usually learn more about what they're interested in than what is required. Now, why is this important? The reason for that is both simple and intense. The students in the American school system are not only the future of our country, but the future of our world. They are the people who will perpetuate our society and move us forward, both in technology and culturally. So why would we rely on those people after giving them a subpar educational experience? Right now, our society is propagated by people who are geniuses. People like Thomas Edison, people like Isaac Newton, people like Elon Musk, depending on who you ask. These are the people that currently progress us. We rely on those few. So why rely on the minority of the population to progress us as a society when instead we could teach people who are average to behave like geniuses? If we could foster that natural creativity, if we could foster that intuition and the desire to learn, we wouldn't have to rely on the few to progress our society. Rather, we could create people to progress our society, and we'd be better off as a whole.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the founding ideals of the United States of America during the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And such ideals should be the most important thing to defend or uphold within our nation. But, as I speak to you all today, 44 million people are starving within America. But, if that doesn't tug on your heart, 14 million of them are kids. The top 1% within America, who cannot work a day in their lives, owns over 71% of all the wealth within America, while we, the people, only own 20%. And over 33 million Americans are right now in poverty. Those things together prove that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness has been replaced with death, poverty, and the pursuit of oppression. It also proves that the status quo we live in can only be tolerated. But first, for a short summary of today, we'll first look into why income inequality is a problem. We will then discover the causes of said problems, and then we will finally fish for some solutions. Now let's get into why it's such a problem today in our society. It's a problem for itself because it can cause some things within a person's life to be blocked by a paywall of out-of-control prices, with childcare, groceries, and gas. For example, for gas, it's now $4, as you can see all over the country. From Ludum, they state that childcare's average to be around $14,000. The USDA stated in 2023, prices for groceries has increased by 5.8%, and it's only rising faster. All together just beats down on the middle classes of America, forcing them to buy something no less than a day for $100, while the rich, who have the wealth to buy such products and even own them, win in the end because they're able to do nothing and get everything, while we work all day and get nothing thanks to such prices. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now on to taxes, like the overtime tax and the loopholes. In the simplest way I can put the overtime tax, it's taxing the worker for working overtime. It's also rated at the same rates of regular income taxes. So for workers, it's 30% of overtime and regular pay, going away from the wallets of the worker to coffers of government that no longer cares for the people, but of corrupted bureaucrats and greedy corporations. And such info comes from the Tax Foundation in 2023. What we see there is the taking of wealth from the poor, increasing their suffering. But if that wasn't enough, let's look towards loopholes. From Smart Asset, they say this: a tax loophole is a tax law provision or a shortcoming in legislation that allows individuals or companies to avoid tax liability, or short terms, legal tax fraud. Of course, anyone can do this, but you have the money to waste, which we can't. But Bill Gates can. Also, from the Washington Post, the richest Americans are hiding more than 20% of their earnings from the IRS, which comes from a new comprehensive estimate into tax evasion. How is it fair for all of us to work all day and pay almost all the income taxes, while the rich, who don't even work a second in their lives, pay almost zero of the income taxes? That's not fair if you ask me. Now let's go to the causes of income inequality. And cause number one, monopolies. From Observer in 2023, they stated that not only BlackRock owns over $12 trillion, but they also own 40% of the United States' official GDP. But it's not just them holds this 40%. It's their friends from Vanguard and State Street. That level of power at the United States has only been achieved by an oil company called Standard Oil within the 20th century. It no longer exists thanks to the monopoly laws we have in place right now. So according to that, they are breaking every single law under the sun. Also, thanks to such monopolies existing, the level of quality within the consumer goods the average American consumes goes down, but yet not the price. So let's set the stage here. You're going on a walk to your family fair, and there you're going to get some food. But you already buy the overpriced goods. You only find out later the stuff is poorly made or barely filled. To prove this, from the Open Markets Institute, they say when giant companies like Amazon puts rivals out of business, this leads to a lost consumer choice simply because there are fewer and fewer retail outlets. But ultimately, monopolies leads to there being fewer and fewer truly unique products for sale as well. They could be selling you a phone that no longer works, but you have no choice but to buy for over $1,000 because there's no other choice than that store. Cause number two, prices. I hit this a little bit on the top here for prices for food, gas, and childcare, but here's one more. From the Peter G. Pearson Foundation, it said prices for healthcare has now reached to $13,000 per person. Instead, prices has increased by 7% in 2023. That price tag alone only favors the wealthy, leaving kids like you and me that die in the streets. It may not sound nice, but it must be said because that's how corrupted our system is now. Cause number three, the decrease of accessible jobs and wages. For jobs, let's look towards NAFTA. NAFTA was the tariff-free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, which was meant to give us hundreds of thousands of jobs, apparently, but yet it was quite the opposite. From the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they said that when NAFTA went into effect, 4 million people lost their jobs, and we're still missing most of these jobs. So from 1992 to 2020, 4 million people either went homeless or gone into poverty. But it's just those who lost their jobs. What about the families who lost their life into thriving within the United States? And now have a choice: starve or become slaves to the banks by taking their loans. Now, on to the wages part of this. From Brookings, they say that 44% of workers are severely underpaid, and 55% of them say that their pay is not keeping up with inflation. So let's put this into perspective here. Roughly 38 to 36% of America identifies as working class people. And over 60% of them say that they're being severely underpaid. Our workers are right now earning scraps, but yet we're helping the rich. You may be asking right now, with all these problems, how can we solve this? But there's many ways we could solve this, but I'm here to tell you the most effective solutions to help. First, onto the tax system. We must fix the loopholes and close them shut, but yet we won't be doing much because we're not truly fixing the main problem. The thing that's proven to be most effective by nations in Europe is an equitable tax system. What an equitable tax system looks like is the implication of a more fairer tax system where everyone is paid their fair share. But it doesn't mean everyone's taxed the same. That's an illusion of equality. But it means that the rich must be truly taxed the most, while we, the people, are truly given the least. Still lies from a government that only cares about Wall Street instead of us. Next, end the overtime tax. They'll finally give the workers the money they need to buy the food for their kids and for themselves. And lastly, make healthcare universal. I could be hearing you screaming right now. The cost of this could kill us, but actually, it's cheaper than you think. From the National Library of Medicine, they go into saying, taking into account the cost of expansion for universal healthcare, they estimate a 13% savings cost with a national healthcare expenditure, equivalent to over $450 billion annually. And our government right now spends $4.5 trillion. But overall, we're right now seeing millions of kids in the streets starving, asking help from our government. But yet our government's only helping those who has food in their bellies and wealth within their pockets. Should we deny those who don't the help that they truly deserve?
Let's break down the invasion of Ukraine in 30 seconds. So basically, back in the day, Ukraine was like part of the Soviet Union with Russia, and a lot of Russians who like grew up during that time think that Ukraine should like still belong to Russia because they have like similar people and cultures and stuff, but Ukraine does not vibe with that. So unfortunately, after the Crimean Peninsula was invaded in 2014, they had to give up some of their land back to Russia, and that was really sad for the Ukrainians, and it increased the tensions between the two countries, which leads us to 2022 when Russia officially invaded the rest of Ukraine. Thanks for listening, and let me know any other world conflicts you'd like to learn about. Bye! Posted to TikTok in November 2022. Now I don't know about you guys, but that didn't sound like a very credible source of information. The sad reality is that this is the way most people are getting their news in the modern era. This stems from a larger issue called anti-intellectualism. Anti-intellectualism is defined by Merriam-Webster as opposition or hostility to intellectuals or to an intellectual view. We have seen a great increase in anti-intellectualism in recent years due to the rise of social media, which has contributed to the spread of misinformation. In our discussion, we will research what anti-intellectualism is and what's behind its spread. Then we will study the implications anti-intellectualism has on society. And finally, we will experiment with solutions to the ever-growing threat of anti-intellectualism. We start with the question, what is anti-intellectualism? Well, as previously defined, anti-intellectualism is a general distrust of intellectuals and experts. However, it encompasses more than just that. In his 1963 book, Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, Richard Hofstadter outlines 3 types of anti-intellectualism. The first kind is subtermed anti-rationalism, which places critical thought as an inferior quality to have, putting more emphasis on common sense than research and science. The second form of anti-intellectualism, called unreflective instrumentalism, prefers short-term payoffs over researched long-term consequences. The third and most important form of anti-intellectualism to today's discussion is the anti-elitist form of anti-intellectualism, which was the kind defined by Merriam-Webster. This third form of anti-intellectualism stems from the populist ideology that places intellectuals in the elite, working against the masses. A 2022 study published in the medical journal Molecular Biology and Clinical Medicine in the Age of Politicization found that individuals with more anti-intellectual beliefs have shown a strong correlation to endorsing misinformation. This misinformation is much more accessible with social media like TikTok, which allows people to post and share short-form content under the guise of being reliable without citing any real sources. Now we move to study the implications of anti-intellectualism on society. Anti-intellectualism has a significant effect on common beliefs in a society. A 2020 study conducted by Eric Merkley, a professor of political science at the University of Toronto, found that there is a high correlation between anti-intellectualism and opposition to scientific findings on climate change, nuclear power, GMOs, and water fluoridation. This opposition to facts leads to a less educated public, which in turn will spread misinformation and make harmful policy decisions. Most notably in recent years is misinformation surrounding COVID-19. A 2021 study published to the journal Nature Human Behavior listed common false claims about COVID-19 stemming from anti-intellectualism, such as a link between COVID-19 and 5G telecommunications technology, the ability to cure COVID-19 with vitamin C, and the artificial creation of SARS-CoV-2 by either China or the United States. The worst misconception about COVID-19 that they list is the idea that, quote, COVID is not a serious disease and its effects are comparable to those of the seasonal flu, end quote. This misinformation led to lax laws on vaccines and masks that we saw during the pandemic. TikTok and other social media sites play an influential role in spreading this misinformation. A 2023 study published to Jamia Open analyzed TikTok videos posted to the coronavirus hashtag and found that 28% of the videos contained moderate to high levels of misinformation. These videos on average had 6.8 to 9.4 million views each. This misinformation propagates an unhealthy attitude towards the COVID-19 virus and generally decreases public welfare. With this in mind, we must contextualize anti-intellectualism to prevent the further spread of misinformation. Finally, we must experiment with solutions to the threat of anti-intellectualism. Matthew Mata, a former professor of political science at Oklahoma State University and current professor of health law, policy, and management at Boston University, proposes the idea that verbal intelligence is a mitigator to anti-intellectualism. Mata defines verbal intelligence as, quote, a collection of cognitive skills that reflects one's ability to broadly demonstrate comprehension of one's vernacular language, end quote. Put simply, being able to understand words. His 2017 study on the topic showed a significant increase in trust of the scientific community in those with higher levels of verbal intelligence. One culprit in declining levels of verbal intelligence, as found by a 2018 study published by Wiley periodicals, is frequent internet usage in childhood. The study finds that frequent internet usage between the ages of 5 to 16 lowers verbal intelligence and decreases gray matter in the brain in later stages of life. To counteract this, there are many actions we can take. TCL Labs published an article in 2021 listing a few ways to improve verbal intelligence, including keeping a diary, reading books and magazines on various topics, solving crossword puzzles, and learning a new word every day. Additionally, a 2015 article published to the Washington Post found that receiving musical training can also improve verbal intelligence. With a few simple actions a day, one can gradually improve their verbal intelligence and counteract anti-intellectualism. This speech has been much longer than your typical TikTok, but it has allowed for more accurate and comprehensive information to be provided. Through this speech, we researched what anti-intellectualism is and what's behind its spread. Then we studied the implications anti-intellectualism has on society. And finally, we experimented with solutions to the ever-growing threat of anti-intellectualism. Now that we are properly prepared to combat anti-intellectualism, we can stop misinformation and its harms in their tracks.
Are my judges ready? All right, I have a confession. I want to win this round. As much as I would love to see everyone do well, I don't. I want this. Well, now that we got that out of the way, I guess now you know I'm self-centered. But is it self-centered to verbalize that we all want to win? Except for the lovely judges, of course. Are we all self-centered? Yes. We are all seeking happiness in our own ways, and we will see this through identifying self-centeredness and the signs. Next, we will dive deeper and ask ourselves why. And finally, we will address some solutions to discover that happiness comes not from ourselves, but from others. First, we can seek out happiness and address how this quest creates self-centered behavior. As Merriam-Webster defines self-centeredness as being concerned solely with one's own desires, needs, or interests. Self-centeredness can be seen in everyone in some form, but the signs are not always clear to us. So, the first example of self-centered behavior we can examine is when a person tends to dominate a conversation. Talking a lot in a conversation is not bad, but when some tend to talk over others, then it starts to become a problem. People who are self-centered tend to speak the most in conversations and meetings, says Amy Deramus, a licensed clinical psychologist. When you talk to them, it can feel like the conversation only focuses on their life, their accomplishments, and their problems. These types of behaviors can be problematic when interacting with others because they are also people who need to be able to contribute to discussions. The second sign up for examination is when people display inconsiderate or apathetic behavior. People who are self-centered individuals tend to focus on themselves rather than on others, as people who are self-centered will often do everything on their own terms without taking your needs or desires into consideration as well, says Danielle Smith, a private practice therapist. This lack of consideration for your feelings is not always intentional, but rather an adverse byproduct of someone's self-centeredness. This can be discouraging for their peers who also have feelings and need to discuss their own problems. The behaviors of self-centered people are simply how they are trying to maximize their own happiness by focusing on themselves. So now we have to stop and think. Why are we seeking happiness in these ways? Why are people self-centered? It is not always because we are bad people, but actually for a myriad of reasons. Firstly, a large factor of self-centered behavior is a person's low self-esteem. Not having the confidence to be secure in one's own person causes unhealthy reactions to emerge. As the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute states, individuals with low self-esteem can also exhibit self-centered behaviors. They may constantly seek validation and attention from others as a way to boost their self-worth. We as humans want to feel good about ourselves, and so those who are self-centered are simply seeking the approval of themselves from others because they aren't willing to approve of themselves. Secondly, our biological nature actually contributes to our self-centered behavior. Examining our biological structures in relation to loneliness is what the University of Chicago did in a 2017 study, where they examined a positive feedback loop between loneliness and self-centeredness. They found that loneliness created self-centered people, and self-centered people created their loneliness. This study was instrumental in discovering the cause factors behind these types of behaviors. The evolution of loneliness, a key focus in the study, plays a significant role in developing our self-centeredness. We are biologically wired to interact with others. Our immediate reaction to feelings of loneliness is to focus on ourselves, as humans evolved to become such a powerful species, in large part due to mutual aid and protection, and the changes in the brain that proved adaptive in social interactions, says John Cassiopa, the director for the Center of Cognitive and Social Neuroscience in Chicago. When we don't have mutual aid and protection, we are more likely to become focused on our own interests. That is, we become more self-centered, as self-centeredness is a biological result of loneliness, which has caused us to act in these ways.
All factors and causations of self-centeredness help us greater understand the behavior and why we see it in others. So finally, we can realize happiness doesn't come from self-centeredness, but rather when we act selfless, or for the judges, should I say, self-left. Learning to understand self-centeredness has brought us to the point of this speech, overcoming our self-centered behavior. The actions of self-centered people cause harm to others, calling for us to strive to be better humans. The first thing we can always do is be better listeners. Listening is an essential skill in everyday life to communicate and build relationships amongst our peers. The medium shares active listening is a transformative skill and doesn't just negate your need to speak, it also removes your strict hold of the world revolving around you. This statement is important to hear because it points out the key aspect of listening. We have to do it just to do it. You cannot just listen to prove that you have to listen so someone is being heard. This is the first step to becoming less self-centered. Next, we have to overcome self-centeredness by shifting the focus from ourselves to others. The world does not revolve around me or you, and by taking the time to recognize and act on that can make a difference in someone else's life and shift the mindset of self-centeredness to a self-aware attitude. This can be done by participating in activities that aren't for you, but for others. As Sanju Pradeepa, with a background in psychology education and English language, encourages us to offer help and kindness whenever you can. Do small things with a smile, like holding open the door, or carrying someone's bags, or giving a genuine compliment. These things can help making others feel good, can boost your well-being and happiness. Taking the time to recognize the world revolves around more than just you can help you as a person reach out to others. Because everyone is in need of help in some form, and by taking the time to recognize and act on that makes a difference in someone else's life. And so self-centeredness may not always be a bad thing, but it can be. We have to be willing to practice selflessness and be self-aware instead of resorting to our behaviors of self-centeredness. By focusing on others more, we can form more relationships and connections with other individuals, reducing our loneliness and the low self-esteem that has caused us to become so self-centered. And so when I started this speech, I was honest. I want to win. On our journey to find happiness, we discovered some of the signs of self-centeredness. Then we asked ourselves why we use self-centeredness as a way to find happiness in our lives and discovered some of the reasons. And then finally, we addressed some solutions and identified that happiness comes not from ourselves, but from others. We must overcome self-centeredness and strive to be better people. Let me be the first. I can in earnest say I want to see your speech place well. Your speech can teach me something new, because now I can listen. And you are just a really great speaker. You all are.
Okay. Part of the everyday diet, but an impending hospital visit for others. Gluten, the enemy of celiacs. This is the reality of living with celiac disease. Tolerating abdominal pain, cramping, nausea, bloating, fatigue, weight loss, itching, and skin rash are only some of the symptoms that come with celiac disease. People who sadly have this disease already have the world against them in so many ways. The government needs to create and uphold a policy to help these citizens' lives. To get to the heart of this issue, we must look at what celiac disease is and how it affects our citizens. Next, we look at what other countries are doing to help their celiac citizens before finally taking a peek about what you can do to create change. Can you guess what we're going to talk about first today? If you guess celiac disease, then you read my mind. Celiac disease is a serious autoimmune disease that occurs in genetically predisposed people when the ingestion of gluten leads to damage in the small intestine, as explained by the Celiac Disease Foundation. When you have this disease, you cannot eat any gluten, no matter how small. Some examples of gluten are wheat, rye, and barley. Or, in other terms, anything that really has any flavor. If you do ingest gluten, or your food has been cross-contaminated with it, it will cause immediate harm to your body. It can get so severe that you need surgery to move some parts of your small intestine. This causes many issues when trying to eat out or in any situation that you'll be eating around gluten. The National Institute of Health estimates that nearly 2 million people in the United States have celiac disease. That is 2 million people who every day they struggle to go eat out, but they also struggle in their own homes. This is because of the cost of gluten-free foods in the United States. Beth Israel DeCountess Medical Center reports that specialty gluten-free foods, such as cereal, breads, and pastas, are often 2 to 3 times more expensive than the standard gluten-containing products. People should not have to spend all their hard-earned dough to accommodate for this price difference. That, which I must say, is mandatory for their diets. The Celiac California goes on to report that the economic burden of celiac disease is significant. Gluten-free products are at least 74% to 518% more expensive than their gluten-containing equivalents. Gluten-free products do cost more to make, but the celiac community needs our government's help. Our government needs to roll out these policies like other countries are doing. Other governments have been seen helping their celiac citizens. And all of these people are having a huge weight just lifted off of their shoulders. The Celiac Foundation compiled a list of all of the world's policies. And there are 5 countries that stuck out to me in an only list of 8. In Argentina, if you are diagnosed by your healthcare provider, then they must cover the cost of the alternative gluten-free flours and gluten-free mixes. Ireland and Canada have similar policies where you can receive a tax deduction for the extra cost of these gluten-free foods. The UK's program allows patients to receive gluten-free foods as part of their prescription. Italy has arguably the best policy where patients can receive up to 140 euros or $152 a month just for being celiac. Italy also teaches restaurants how to accommodate for customers with celiac disease so they will have a reduced risk for cross-contamination. All of these policies have one thing in common. You need to be diagnosed by celiac disease by a doctor to see these benefits. This is because someone could claim to have celiac disease so they could take advantage of the program. These countries have seen so many benefits from these programs, but specifically the restaurant industry. These companies are getting educated on how to prepare food that is safe for celiac people to eat. People in Europe have a less chance of getting glutenized or the accidental ingesting of gluten through cross-contamination because of this program. In the US, there's a certainty every day on whether you are going to get glutenized. You must plan everywhere you want to go in order that they can make those accommodations for you. You also must ensure that what you're going to eat goes within your budget. In some restaurants, the additional fee for making a dish gluten-free is abysmal. Personally, I eat a gluten-free diet, but I am not celiac. One time I went out to eat to get a gluten-free pizza, and it was additional $5 just for the extra crust. This is an unrealistic price for food that is mandatory for people to live a long and healthy life. Last, but definitely not least, let's talk about what programs that the U.S. should implement to help these people. SNAP and WIC are 2 programs that support citizens in the U.S. who have food insecurity. These programs pride themselves on helping the country, but they're forgetting an important part of our population, the celiac community. SNAP has no gluten-free options. whereas WIC only has limited options such as gluten-free bread, and the only carbs are white and corn tortillas. One way that we could help implement a program is by adding a section underneath WIC. The WIC program helps support healthy diets and help improve food security. This is done by WIC participants receiving checks or vouchers for purchasing food for each month. If someone is diagnosed by a doctor with celiac disease, then they could apply to the celiac selection program of the WIC. This section would provide users with a certain amount of money to help a month to go towards their purchases of gluten-free foods to accommodate for the price difference. This would greatly benefit the celiac community. But to see these benefits, it starts with you. You can help these people by writing to our senators. Our senators are John Hoeven and Kevin Cramer, and they accept letters from the public. You need to write to our senators to push for a bill to be written to help these people. If you want to make a difference in these people's lives, then this is the place to start. Well, all that I've said today may sound like a no-brainer. People are not taking the necessary steps needed to see change. And that's where you guys come in. Now you know what celiac disease is and how it affects our citizens, what other countries are doing to help their citizens, and exactly what you need to do to create change. Write to our senators. Tell them how this community is struggling and why a section needs to be added into the WIC program. These people will continue to suffer because of these rising gluten-free costs if we don't create change. If you only get one thing from my speech today, it is that the change that we need to see today starts with you.
And that concludes the final round of Persuade here on YourLiveEvent.com, presented by Dakota Heritage Bank, sharing our heritage, sharing our future, with locations in North Dakota and Minnesota. DHBankND.com. The finals of Inform are next. And welcome back to our 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet coverage on YourLiveEvent.com. It's time for the final round for Speech to Inform, presented by Bloomfield Enterprises of Hillsboro, proud supporter of athletics and activities at Hillsboro High. Our finalists are Cameron Nissen of Thompson, Jayla Ridout of West Fargo Horace, Austin Zerpuk of West Fargo High, Lucy Sherbensky of West Fargo Horace, Shaban Kissy of Drayton, Jack Bina of Park River, Emily Hutchison of West Fargo Horace, and Yasmin LeBaron of West Fargo Horace. Our first speaker is Cameron Nissen from Thompson.
We will come to understand ways we can improve our own mental well-being. Now, let's explore our minds to understand what mental health is. Mental health is a part of everyone. The World Health Organization defines it as a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life. Everyone's mental health is different, as it can be affected in many different ways, such as trauma, bullying, genetics, economic status. The list goes on. A study from Johns Hopkins University found that around 20% of adolescents may experience mental health problems in a given year, and only about half of these kids get help. Our bodies and minds are not separate. Kids who are affected by mental illness may experience it in their bodies as much as they can mentally. The most common mental disorder identified by the World Health Organization is anxiety, which can cause feelings of fear and worry that are strong enough to overpower daily activities. Something we can all relate to is fear, whether you are taking a test or doing something like public speaking. Fear can be a common emotion. When we are scared, our heart rates tend to increase. If severe enough, a rapid heart rate or tachycardia can interfere with normal heart function and increase the risk of sudden cardiac arrest. Now, this is only in very extreme circumstances. What about something more common with a mental disorder? Let's talk about depression, an illness where the person affected is faced with loss of interest in things they normally like to do and overwhelming feelings of sadness. Depression can lead to a loss of appetite and cause weight loss, or can lead to intensified hunger and cause rapid weight gain. Many mental illnesses can even go hand in hand and have the same symptoms, like how post-traumatic stress disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder can both cause someone to have trouble sleeping and lead to nightmares. Every mental health disorder has different symptoms, and each kid affected may experience few or all of them. As you can imagine, living with the symptoms of these disorders can seem stressful and hard to manage. A good way to deal with mental illness is to seek help from a professional. Now, this may seem like an easy thing to do, but asking for help can be very hard for certain people, and even when they have the courage to, it can take a long time to get with a provider. It's common to have to wait a couple of weeks to get with a therapist, but sometimes the wait is even longer. The Center for Rural Health identified the average wait time for behavioral services across the country to be around 6 weeks. This is because of the lack of providers. I visited with Angie Muse, a social worker who has a bachelor's degree in psychology and who works with people who are struggling with mental illness, and asked her why this is. She responded with, mental illness has always been around. We're just more aware of it now. People are more willing and accepting to find help, so the demand for providers is increasing. Not only are people in our communities becoming more accepting of mental illness, but celebrities are too. Many of our idols have opened up about having troubles with their mental health disorders. Taylor Swift has talked about previously having an eating disorder. Demi Lovato has come forward and told her story about bipolar disorder. Even The Rock has shared his experiences with depression. So even though people are becoming less scared to talk about mental illness, this good news is creating a problem. Mental illness was the most commonly reported concern among the Community Health and Needs Assessments, otherwise known as CHNAs. 31 out of the 36 CHNAs conducted in North Dakota voted mental illness as a top concern, just as it has been in the past few years. Compounding this issue is the lack of mental health professionals in North Dakota. The American Psychological Association has found that around 60% of psychologists reported having no openings for patients, 40% carrying a wait list of 10 or more, and nearly half of the 2,000 psychologists interviewed reported feeling burnt out. This is not only bad for the provider, but can be terrible for the patient as well. Having to wait up to years to get with a particular therapist can make someone wonder if waiting for help is even worth it. If a patient is better suited with a different provider, They may even have to be transferred, which can take even longer. Next, let's not let our emotions control us as we talk about what happens if mental illness goes unaddressed. The conditions of both children and adults with mental illness can severely worsen if gone untreated. And with a lack of providers, patients going untreated is not uncommon. Let's use someone with anorexia as an example. If someone with anorexia goes untreated, their body weight will continue to decrease. After a while, their body will use up all its muscle as energy and move on to eating their organs, and they will end up dying. Getting help will save these people's lives. If someone who lives in a rural community were to get diagnosed with anorexia, the closest eating disorder clinic could be hours away. Say someone who lives in Grand Forks were to get diagnosed. The closest institute is an hour and 20 minutes away in Fargo. There are many kids that experience anorexia and have to miss school to talk with a provider. And if they have to go from Grand Forks to Fargo and back to Grand Forks, they can end up missing most, if not all, the day of school. Other disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder, or more commonly known as PTSD, if gone untreated, it is not uncommon for PTSD to result in the reliance of drugs and alcohol to cope with intense feelings of anxiety and depression. Addiction has its own negative long-term health outcomes. It can lead to occupational, legal, physical, and even relationship problems. If an adolescent experiences PTSD and turns to reliance on these substances, there can end up being irreversible damage. Even if they try to get help, as we have discovered, waiting to get a provider can take a long time, and their conditions will usually only worsen in this period. Let's now find hope by understanding ways we can seek help for our mental health. Assistance may take a while to get, but once a patient receives that help, their mental health can improve. Research from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration shows that treatment for mental illness works. With appropriate help, people can manage their illnesses, overcome challenges, and lead productive lives. In the time waiting, there are still many ways we can prioritize our mental health by ourselves. We can talk to friends, focus on the good things in life, and understand when we need to take breaks, as well as many other ways, such as using online resources like 211 or 988. Both these numbers can connect those in need to trained online counselors. So getting in with a therapist isn't the only way we can prioritize our mental health. Every person is unique. We all have different thoughts and react to things in life differently. You have an individual story to tell. You have a name, a history, and your own personality. We now understand that mental health is a part of everyone. Also, how mental illness may affect others, even people like celebrities who we may look up to. As a society, we've become more accepting of mental illness. Even though our acceptance has caused a shortage of mental health professionals, we don't have to let that stop us from seeking help. We can all now understand that it is okay to not be okay.
Judges ready? Okay. OMG. It is so preppy in here. And that means trendy. Social media has become a driving factor in trend setting. Social media may have changed the way that these trends gain popularity, but continues to leave the question, where does it come from? Today, we're going to scroll through what is trendy and how it becomes trendy, post about the history of trends, and like the impacts of social media trends on society. Now, let's scroll into my first point. Social media, what is trendy and how does it become trendy? A trend is defined as a current style or preference by Merriam-Webster. However, these current styles and preferences don't last long. Clothes go out of style, a new store is discovered, and different franchises change their marketing strategy. Trends are made and followed in different ways. These ways break down into two main categories: emotional responses and repetition. Forbes in 2023 states virality is dependent on two things: emotional connection and prolonged engagement. For emotional connection, think content that makes you laugh, harmless pranks, sad, dogs in a shelter, or even angry, customers lashing out at customer service workers, elicits quick reactions, showing how people are more likely to go viral or start a trend if they connect with your viewers' emotions. We can see these same techniques applied to books and movies. This is why videos talking about something crazy that happened, whether it was a good or bad circumstance, evoke emotion and increase viewership. In addition to emotional responses, we can see how repetition of certain memes or content will increase its popularity, making it a trend. The same article continues, the point is the more a user engages with a specific piece of content, the more frequently the algorithm is going to push to them, thus trapping them in a bubble of content that the platform wants them to see. This highlights how trends don't even need to be entertaining, just repetitive. That's why if you were to like or heart a Little Miss Speech Kid post, you're more likely to see Little Miss posts in the future. That may or may not apply to you. Basically, these trends are spread because of two different ideas: how they evoke emotions and their repetitive nature. Trends are spread in different ways, historically coming in waves of popularity rather than steady streams. Now let's post about my second point: the history of trends. Trends have come in different forms throughout time. Currently, we see them spread through social media and other online platforms. Previously, they were spread through magazines and other physical forms of media. The University of Minnesota explains the way trends are spread prior to social media as television, movies, newspapers, magazines, and public spaces like offices or public transportation. However, as these forms of media got older, they eventually lost their trendiness. And as convenient as it may be to go outside in frigid North Dakota weather to pick up a newspaper or magazine, people will stick to their social media and podcasts instead, showing just how quick people throw away old ideas when something new and more convenient comes along. Definition in 2021 expands on the same 85% of Gen Z adults use TikTok daily, followed by Instagram and YouTube. 75% of millennials in the survey use YouTube daily, followed by Instagram and Facebook. 71% of the Gen X age group use Facebook daily, followed by Instagram and YouTube, and the baby boomer demographic favors Facebook. As social media ages, so do the people who use it. Similar to how magazines are out of style, or in other words, aren't trending, platforms like Facebook are beginning to be replaced with newer platforms with younger users and more features specific to their demographic. Now that we know how trends are spread, let's look at how they've changed throughout the years. Looking back 40 years, 80s were known for the Nintendo big hair and over-the-top clothing. Moving forward 10 more years, 90s trends included straight hair, chunky highlights, patterned clothes, and Walkman. In the 2000s, there were a lot of crop tops, short skirts, crimped hair, and as technology advanced, iPods were reaching their prime on the Trendiometer. In the 2010s, there were a lot of skinny jeans, slime, fidget spinners, and of course, cell phones. As we near the 2020s, history began repeating itself. Crop tops came back in style, and cell phones remained popular, except we left some of the more bright and loud trends behind us, making room for more aesthetic ones. As we all know, smartphones have become an everyday essential found in everyone's pockets, turning into a big trend and an even bigger trend transmitter. With the rise of the smartphone came the rise of social media, revolutionizing trends. Finally, let's click the like button and scroll into my final point: social media trends and their impacts on society. Have you ever seen someone doing a TikTok dance or quoting a random meme in a normal conversation? Well, that's because these trends get stuck in people's heads and impact their impulses. The current impacts of social media on society boil down to two things: connections and basic psychology. These trends tend to draw people closer and at the same time push them apart, both building and destroying connections. Seeing people who have similar problems as you helps reduce stigma around many important issues, or can spark a sense of community if you see people participating in the same trends as you. However, there is a dark side to social media. Recently, replying and stitching videos in rude ways has been normalized, making it a trend. Medium, an online news site in 2023, expands on this, saying the limitations of text-based communications on social media can result in misunderstandings. Tone and context can be lost in messages or comments, potentially causing individual friction. Social media can both hinder and improve connections between different people, whether you know them in person or not. These trends also have impacts on basic psychology. These social media apps alter people's impulses, so much so that Gen Z has become reliant on popular internet phrases rather than individual expressions. Additionally, people use these trends to shape their entire personalities, which is where we get the I worship Taylor Swift versus Taylor Swift is a cult member rivalry. We can't seem to dislike or not like someone. Instead, these trends always tend to bring things to the extremes. Finally, these trends can be both positive and negative. Looking first at the latter, a few years ago, we saw many people hospitalized for the consumption of Tide Pods. Hamilton Health Sciences in 2018 shows the exact number of people impacted by this trend, saying at least 40 youth have received medical treatment for performing this stunt, showing just how far people go to become trendy. While there may be trends that show these harms, there's also positive and supportive trends such as supporting small businesses. Social media and trends allow small businesses to reach out to more people than ever before, and they allow people to interact with small businesses more by clicking like or subscribing instead of having to buy a thing. We can see how trends have changed and adapted over time. Social media may have changed the way that these trends gain popularity, but continued to leave the question, where do they come from? Today, we scrolled through what is trendy and how it becomes trendy, posted about the history of trends, and liked the impacts of social media trends on society. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.
Driving a John Deere tractor is like having horsepower and history at your fingertips. My name is Jack, and I am the fourth generation to operate mechanized farm machinery on my family's grain farm. My great-grandfather, a first-generation American farmer, bought his first John Deere tractor in 1940 with a loan and a handshake from his local bank. He could have never envisioned the day his great-grandson would be seated in an air-conditioned tractor, guided by satellite, powered at the strength of 400 horses, while balancing the efficiencies of labor, fossil fuels, and chemicals at the touch of a button. Anyone who is a foodie, environmentalist, entrepreneur, or a history buff can appreciate the innovations inspired by a simple blacksmith named John Deere. Today I share with you the history of this man, the entrepreneur, the products innovated by his corporation, and finally, the technologies that provided food and fiber for a growing planet. There's a reason why John Deere is a household name in agriculture. According to the company's archives, Deere was born in 1804 in Rutland, Vermont, after his father was lost at sea when he was just 4 years old. Deere was raised solely by his mother. As a young man, he won acclaim for his workmanship and ingenuity as a blacksmith. When the New England economy collapsed in 1836, he followed other Vermonters to Illinois, where he established a blacksmith shop in Grand Detour. Shortly after arriving, Deere learned from his farmer customers that the commonly used cast iron plows of the day performed poorly in the sticky soil of the Midwest prairie. Soil clung to the plow bottoms, and farmers had to scrape off the dirt every few feet. Clearly, this was a waste of time and energy. Convinced that a plow with a highly polished surface would shed the sticky soil as it moved through the field, Deere made a plow using steel from a broken saw blade. The need for a self-scouring plow was so great, it said hundreds of people gathered at a local farm to see the young blacksmith test his new product. It wasn't long before manufacturing plows became not only Deere's identity, but its business as well. In 1848, Deere moved his growing operation to Moline, Illinois, on the east bank of the Mississippi River. The river provided water power for running a factory, as well as riverboats for bringing in raw materials and moving plows to the market. Soon, Deere's company was making 1,000 plows a year. Business boomed as Deere established a reputation for both his plows and his principles. Among them was his insistence on selling only high-quality products. He once said, "Quality does not happen by accident. It is a result of hard work and attention to detail." John Deere died in 1886 with his heirs and engineers leading the company under the same philosophy that drives the company today. From that humble beginning, from a polished piece of steel that became a plow, John Deere Company released his first horse-drawn harvester in 1912 and engine-driven tractor in 1918. An agricultural powerhouse had launched. For those who worked the land, a John Deere was more than a machine. It was a trusted companion, a machine that replaced both horses and manpower. The productivity of the American farmer had emerged. The U.S. Census of Rural America saw a population migration of 10% per decade to urban careers as the efficiency of tractors allowed farmers to get more done in a day with less reliance on manual labor. Other competitors emerged, offering steel and rubber tires, but John Deere enjoyed the majority of market sales with the Model D for dependable two-cylinder engine tractor for 37 years. Another interesting fact from the company's website is that during World War II, the Deere family directed the Farm Machinery and Equipment Division of War Production, an organization that helped the U.S. government produce critical goods and machinery for the Allies' war efforts. During the war, Deere expanded its manufacturing capability to include transmission for tanks, aircraft parts, ammunition, and mobile laundry units. John Deere was not just a brand, it became a way of life for farmers. In 1946, Deere introduced its first self-propelled combine, uniting the harvesting and threshing methods into a single machine. In 1950, John Deere introduced the first self-propelled cotton picker. Both of these engine-driven machines replaced the back-breaking work of getting food and fiber to the consumer. Evolutions of each machine have brought many efficiencies for farmers around the world, saving time and human labor. But most relevant to modern conversation is the advancements in the ecology of the growing system down to an exact point on Earth. In 1998, the Precision Farming Receiver was born, allowing GPS to navigate the tractor and pinpoint the accuracy of placing expensive fertilizers and chemicals into the soil. The reduction of these inputs allowed farms again to add another layer of efficiency and sustainability to the science of growing food. Also, today's tractor engines are being engineered to consume ethanol and biodiesel blend fuels and meet federal guidelines for emissions. Seeding and tillage operations are also being engineered into single implements that minimally disturb the soil. As the company expanded in the 1990s, John Deere took their engine-powered technologies to the homeowners, golf courses, landscapers, foresters, and general construction industries. Today, John Deere has over 80,000 employees worldwide, operating over 100 different factory lines that have the same dependability as the original Model D tractor of the early 1900s. The story of John Deere has both breadth and depth. For the history buff and the entrepreneur, he was a simple blacksmith who developed the first commercially successful self-scouring steel plow in 1837 and founded the company that still bears his name. For the conservationists, there are kudos for every generation of farm equipment that reduces the carbon footprint of agriculture and optimizes the soil placement of synthetic chemicals and fertilizers. For all of us who shop for food and love to eat, the developed world enjoys low food prices thanks to the efficiencies of farm machinery. While most don't think about the history of agriculture in the lesser populated flyover states, it is an important example to the world.
When I start. In this new age, where everything we do online is being monitored, tracked, and controlled, data privacy is crucial to understand. This topic is relevant to nearly every single person in the modern day, as almost all of us in this very room have a cellular device in their pocket or have used a mobile phone or computer recently. In fact, according to the Pew Research Center in 2023, 97% of Americans own a smartphone and 95% of American adults use the internet actively. So, what is surveillance capitalism? TechTarget defines as the following. Surveillance capitalism is the monetization of data captured through monitoring people's movements and behaviors online and in the physical world. Consumer surveillance is most commonly used in targeted marketing and advertising. Now, with this definition, you may be wondering how this applies to data privacy as well. Basically, surveillance capitalism refers to companies collecting of someone's online activity to sell to other companies, such as advertisers. Ultimately, surveillance capitalism permeates our daily lives. First, I'll go over my first point of surveillance capitalism and browsing data and explain how corporations make income off of either protecting or selling this data. My second point will cover how communication services and cellular devices can be susceptible to surveillance capitalism as well. And finally, we will look at how surveillance capitalism affects our very own genetic data. Now, let's take a moment to examine surveillance capitalism in the context of our own browsing history. The Federal Trade Commission made the following claim in 2023. When you use an app on your smartphone, advertisers may use a unique advertising identifier to track you. The companies also may track your activity on different internet-connected devices, such as your laptop or your smartphone. When a website you visit tracks you, that's referred to first-party tracking. Whenever you visit a website, your browser history will start being tracked. This is because companies have discovered they can make income off of selling this data to advertisers. Now that we have an understanding of what first-party tracking is, we can have a better grasp on how this is actually permeating our daily lives. Data company Avast in 2020 noted that websites and apps use specialized code that logs your activity in your browser. And this is how both the sites themselves as well as third parties can figure out who you are and what you want or need. Armed with this data, they then try to sell you more relevant products and services. Ultimately, this is why you see so many advertisements online about things that you are interested in, have recently searched for, etc. After these companies have successfully tracked your online presence, they have a better understanding on who you are as a person as well. They gather data on you, your family, your interests, if you have any pets, and just so much more. So now let's find out how our very own cell phones are being monitored for someone else's economic benefit. Cell phones are undoubtedly a very important part of surveillance capitalism. The Markup, a technology news outlet, has found some very interesting information as of 2021. Companies that you have likely never heard of have access to the location history on your mobile phone, an estimated $12 billion market. The location data industry has many players, collectors, aggregators, marketplaces, and location intelligence firms, all of which boast about the scale and precision of the data they've amassed. Location firm Near describes itself as the world's largest data set of people's behavior in the real world, with data representing 1.6 billion people across 44 different countries. Mobile Wallet boasts 40 plus countries, 1.9 billion plus devices, 50 billion mobile signals daily, and 5 plus years of data altogether. And finally, Exmo's website claims its data covers over 25% of the adult population in the United States in just a singular month out of the year. This highlights the absolutely massive scale that these companies are operating on. Also, it's very likely that your own phone carrier is tracking your information to sell it as well. CNET, another reputable technology news outlet, noted the following in 2022. Phone carriers like AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon track various information, including your location, web activity, app usage, and in some cases, your biometric data. And AT&T even collects its users' credit sometimes. So on to my third point. On the topic of biometric data such as fingerprints, let's talk about how surveillance capitalism affects our very own genetic data. Our genetic data is one of the most private elements of our lives. We live in a society where the most intimate parts of our lives, our genetics, can be used and exploited by corporations for profit. The biggest players in the genetic data game are Ancestry DNA and 23andMe. Forbes in 2018 found more than 12 million Americans have sent in their DNA to be analyzed to companies like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA. The spit-in-tube DNA you send in is anonymized and used for genetic drug research, and both sites have been selling this data to third-party companies, such as P&G Beauty, Pepto-Bismol, and even some universities like the University of Chicago for quite some time. In fact, just last week, major pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline announced a $300 million deal with 23andMe. The deal entails that they can use the stored sample to use the data to analyze the stored sample, investigate new drugs to develop, and use genetic data for how patients are selected for clinical trials. Direct-to-customer genetic testing companies like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe are collecting and selling genetic data without protections provided by HIPAA. This could bring up questions about the adequacy of safeguards in place to protect individuals' most private information, that being their genetics. USC Gold reported the following in 2022. DNA contains all the instructions our bodies need to function, representing a tremendous amount of data. It instructs our bodies how to make proteins that are vital for our growth, development, well-being, and overall our health. Since we receive DNA from each of our parents, DNA can also be used to trace our ancestry. DNA is so unique to each person, so much that DNA fingerprinting refers to the practice of identifying individuals based solely on their DNA, a process many of us must know from its use in criminal investigations. DNA fingerprinting may be a misnomer, as one article puts it. DNA is far more complex than fingerprints. A genetic profile is the single most identifiable characteristic an individual can hold. With the massive amount of information that your genetic data holds, the profits made from these companies is unfathomable. Your genetic data holds more information than any cell phone or browser could ever hold. Surveillance capitalism has and will continue to be a presence in our daily lives, impacting our browsing data, cell phones, and even our genetic information. It is essential for us to be aware of how our data is being used and monetized by various companies for their economic benefit. In fact, The Guardian in 2019 explains how certain companies have convinced us to accept surveillance capitalism as a reality, mostly by not informing us of what is actually going on behind closed doors. It describes how global tech companies, such as Google and Facebook, persuaded us to give up our privacy for the sake of, quote, convenience, unquote. How personal information, data, gathered by these companies has been used by others not only to predict our behavior, but also to influence and modify it. Now that we have an understanding of what surveillance capitalism is, we can better understand on how this is actually permeating our daily lives. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. I was just stimming. Stimming, or self-stimulations, more commonly known as fidgeting, is something seemingly only autistic people do. However, that just isn't the case. What I was just doing is classified as a stim or a self-stimulation. Many people engage in these stimulating behaviors, regardless of their mental state or mental conditions. Stimming is fairly new to the medical world as it was only discovered quite recently compared to other medical findings. Because of this, there are still so many questions that require still so many answers. So come along with me as we explore what exactly self-stimulations are and why do they happen, along with looking through the history of them and how it has evolved since the discovery. Finally, we will be discussing who is affected by stims and how they're impacted on their day-to-day lives. So join me on the exploration of self-stimulation. So let's start off by looking into what stimming actually is and why we do it. Stimming, otherwise known as self-stimulating, is defined by Merriam-Webster as, quote, a self-stimulatory behavior that is marked by a repetitive action or movement of the body, end quote. Stimming can display itself in a multitude of ways, but the 5 most common forms are broken down into the parts of the body and the 5 senses that they relate to the most. The Cleveland Clinic of 2023 identifies these 5 types as auditory, olfactory, tactile, visual, and vestibular. Auditory being more focused on hearing and sound-related stims, olfactory focusing on smell, taste, and flavor stims, tactile being any touching or feeling stimulations, stims related to sight are classified as visual stims, and finally, vestibular being any movement-related self-stimulation, such as rocking or pacing back and forth. Looking around the room, I'm sure you all have also been caught pacing back and forth or potentially even humming to yourself, for example, on a stressful day like this to relieve stress and anxiety, especially during potentially a tournament like this. Now the question begs of why do we do it? Laura Hoke, Behavior Analysis, explains why we stim, as she states, quote, stims are things you do without meaning to, and they usually serve some sort of purpose, like helping you regulate your emotions. A lot of people stim, even if we don't always hear it referred to that way. Hoke goes into detail and lists the exact reasons as to why most people self-stimulate. The majority of people use it to regulate their emotions, with 72% of adults dealing with anxiety, 75% with overstimulation, and 69% of people using it to calm themselves down. Other people have stated that they stim to show their excitement, such as clapping and jumping up and down, or just simply because they like the way it makes their brain or body feel. Now let's dive deep into the history of self-stimulations and how they have evolved. Similar to other mental disorders or anything related to that, self-stimulating is fairly new to the research field. According to the Ohio State University Health and Discovery Department and Dr. Hanks, MD for the Center for Autism Services and Transitions, self-stimulations in autism and other mental illnesses was only firstly recognized in the 1940s, barely 80 years ago. However, since then, little to no research was done on the topic. That is, not until a rise in not only the Autism Speaks community, but the amount of autism self-advocates we have in the field. Additionally, Dr. Hanks states, quote, the idea of making stimming a medical problem concerns me. The last thing I want for people is to get the idea that stimming is bad. Stimming is an activity that is common in all people, end quote. Stimming should never again be seen as only a disruption or a problem that needs to be fixed quickly just like that. Now, the mindset of self-stimuli has changed and is now seen by many as an effective emotional outlet. Finally, allow us to discuss the specifics as to who self-stimulates and how it affects them. These self-stimulatory behaviors typically happen in those with specific mental health disorders, such as ASD or autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder or OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more commonly known as ADHD, among many others, according to Rowell and psychologist Graves. Stimming behaviors are more likely to be present in people with autism, as with these individuals, stimulations can become more difficult to control and potentially self-harming. This is likely the reason people stimming is seen for ASD individuals and ASD individuals only. However, just because self-stimulating is more present in those with mental disorders doesn't mean that they're the only ones who do it. You can have the symptoms of something without having the actual thing at hand. In fact, almost everyone engages in stimming or self-stimulating behaviors. As I talked about previously, simple little things are seen as stims, such as biting your nails or twirling your hair, as a way to relieve tension or stress. While stimming is a way people can balance their emotions, it can oftentimes lead to overstimulation, which can take a mental toll on a person. There is a line. However, in order to see it clearly enough, more research needs to be done on the topic. Overstimulation is defined by Oxford Languages as, quote, stimulate psychologically or mentally to an excessive degree. Stephen Zonder of Cross River Therapy reported the discomfort overstimulation can bring people, as he states, quote, overstimulation can feel like an overwhelming flood of sensory input.
This can manifest itself in a variety of ways, including physical discomfort, anxiety, irritability, or even physical pain at times, end quote. The potential to overstimulate is not the only harm of stimming, though. In people where forms of autism are more present, self-stimulating is more likely to be physically harmful to the individual. Stephen Gons, MD psychiatrist, states that stimulations that involve motions similar to head banging or hand biting, for example, will be more damaging and can cause injuries to the individual, end quote. Further medical treatment is advised by many if these stims get to the level of harmfulness I just listed. Not only that, but if they do get to the level of harmfulness, they can be disruptive to others, as stated by Lori Lawrence, psychologist. However, that doesn't mean people are advised to not self-stimulate. This can bring the outcome of being more stressed and anxious than before for most people. Our emotions are called emotions for a reason. There's no need for us to hide the release or expression of them. A study done by the National Library of Medicine found that over 300 autistic adults expressed that attempting to mask their stims actually gave them more anxiety, discomfort, and overall worked in the complete opposite way of what they wished to originally accomplish, which was expressing and releasing their emotions. Today, we have explored what stimming is, the history of it, and finally, how it impacts people in their day-to-day lives. From making people seem like a distraction to being normalized to something everyone does, the evolution of self-stimulation has helped so many people who struggle with mental disorders come to terms with the fact that they're not alone in this. Self-stimulating behaviors are emotional outlets for many, and I, for one, am happy that they are starting to be treated as such.
Anxiety, stress, night terrors, and insomnia. Have these things ever kept you up at night? If you've had a night where you had a bad dream, or a night you didn't remember your dreams, it may surprise you, but as normal as these things may seem, they are not. These are the results of sleep disorders. Let's get comfortable and open up a book about sleep basics, drift off through some general dreaming disorders, and find out how general sleep disorders can keep you up at night. First, let's get comfortable and crack open a book about sleep basics. Sleep is important for everyone. However, based on the current needs and developmental stage of a person, each individual needs a different amount of sleep. According to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders, a person spends approximately 1/3 of their life sleeping. Sleep is as important to survival as food and water, and a lack of sleep can be detrimental to a person's physical and mental health. As a person sleeps, they will cycle through 4 different stages of sleep. These are illustrated by Psychology Today and the Sleep Foundation. The first stage of sleep is the first part of the non-rapid eye movement portion of the sleep cycle, lasting from 1 to 7 minutes. This is when your body begins relaxing. Your brain, heart, and eye movements will begin to slow down in order to bring your body into the relaxation of sleep. The second stage, light sleep, lasts for approximately 10 to 20 minutes. This stage is when your breathing and your heart rate continue decreasing, as well as your body's temperature. Your eye movement stops completely, and brain activity slows, but brief electrical activity still occurs. During this stage, you spend most of your night while you're sleeping. Stage 3 is deep sleep, lasting approximately 20 to 40 minutes. This stage is required in order to feel energetic and refreshed in the morning. During this stage, your body's vital levels will reach their slowest levels, your muscles will relax, and it may be hard to wake you up. This stage occurs in longer periods during the first half of the night than the second half. Finally, we have stage 4, or REM sleep. REM sleep occurs 1.5 hours after initially falling asleep and lasts for approximately 10 to 60 minutes. During REM sleep, your eyes move rapidly back and forth, giving it the name of rapid eye movement. Your vital levels will reach almost waking levels, but your muscles are paralyzed to prevent you from acting out your dreams. REM sleep is when most dreams occur. REM sleep occurs less and less as a person gets older. These 4 stages that are cycled throughout the night are referred to as the sleep cycle. I hope you're not daydreaming as we drift off into the world of general dreaming disorders. According to NINDS, a person spends approximately 2 hours each night dreaming, however they don't remember most of them. Dreams are used to process your feelings. Things throughout the day, such as anxiety or stress, can reach your mind even as you sleep, and your brain will use your dreams to regulate your nervous system and calm your body down. Some people, however, have problems with their dreams, such as nightmares or night terrors. According to Mayo Clinic, nightmares are disturbing dreams associated with negative feelings such as stress or fear that awakens you. These occur mostly in the second half of the night and are more common in children but can occur at any age and are also more common in females than males. Nightmares should not happen often, and for people who do have nightmares often or well into their adulthood, they have a rare disorder called nightmare disorder. According to the DSM-5, nightmare disorder is a repeated occurrence of extended, extremely dysphoric, and well-remembered dreams. These dreams cause you to wake up and feel oriented and alert. They can also cause significant distress and impair daily life. These are not caused by environmental factors such as substance use or other pre-existing medical problems. Another issue people have is sleep terrors. Sleep terrors, also defined by the DSM-5, are partial and abrupt awakening from deep sleep accompanied by panicky screaming, relative unresponsiveness, intense fear, and other signs such as tachycardia, which is rapid heart rate, and or dilated pupils. So, some of you may be thinking, how are these any different from nightmares? Well, according to the Mayo Clinic, night terrors can normally last for up to a few minutes, but can last for longer. They also happen while you are still entirely asleep, whereas nightmares normally cause you to wake up. Night terrors can also pose a risk to a person's safety. You are acting out your dreams while you are fully asleep, so you have no control over what you are doing. That also causes you to have no memory of any of these dreams. And as previously stated, during a night terror, people will appear awake with their eyes open. They could scream or sit up, and they will have other issues that could cause problems. Finally, don't panic or lose your breath, as these next disorders may make it hard to sleep at night. Sleep disorders are common, however, many people don't believe they have them right away because they hear others complain of lack of sleep. Today, I will discuss 3 of the most common sleep disorders: sleep apnea, insomnia, and sleep paralysis. Cleveland Clinic defines sleep apnea as a period of time in which breathing stops and starts throughout the night. Snoring loudly can indicate that you have sleep apnea. There are 2 different types. The first, obstructive, is when the muscles in the throat relax too far and block the airflow to your lungs. And the second, central, is when your brain doesn't send the proper signals to your body to tell it to breathe at night. A third type, treatment-emergent central sleep apnea, is when a person receiving therapy for the obstructive type changes to the central type. During an apnea episode, your brain will react to the blood oxygen drop in your body and make you wake up in order to breathe. This can result in a person with sleep apnea getting much less sleep than they need because they are constantly woken up throughout the night. Sleep apnea, the more severe sleep apnea, the more episodes you have at night. Mayo Clinic defines insomnia as a common sleeping disorder that makes it hard to fall asleep, stay asleep, and makes a person wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to fall back asleep. This can cause a person to feel like they didn't get much sleep and they feel much more tired in the morning than a person who sleeps regularly can. Many adults have acute insomnia, which is short-term and can last for days or weeks. These can be caused by such things as stress or traumatic events. However, some people have chronic insomnia. For it to be referred to as chronic, it must last for a month or more. Insomnia can cause many other medical conditions, and some causes of insomnia include stress, travel, poor sleep habits, eating too late in the evening, medical conditions, mental health conditions, and other sleeping disorders. Insomnia is more common as you get older, and it is more common in females than males. Finally, we have sleep paralysis. Harvard Medical School defines sleep paralysis as a temporary sense of paralysis between the stages of wakefulness and sleep. During a sleep paralysis episode, you may feel fully awake, but you cannot move or speak. Sleep paralysis has 2 types. The first, isolated, is when there is no other signs of any other sleeping disorders, specifically narcolepsy. And the second, recurrent, is when there are multiple episodes over time. When these occur together, it is referred to as recurrent isolated sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis can cause hallucinations that can cause anxiety, such as feeling as if somebody is in your room, feeling as if you are being choked or somebody is pressing on your chest, or feeling as if you are flying or out of your body. This all according to Harvard Medical School. We snuggled up with a book about sleep basics, drifted through our dreaming disorders, and made it through a night talking about sleep disorders. So next time you have a problem with anxiety, stress, sleep terrors, or insomnia, think about what you've learned today.
If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense, end quote. We all know the famous Top Hat fellow, the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. But he was actually named after a disease, the Mad Hatter disease. He was called this due to his behavior being similar to those who experienced the harmful effects of mercury poisoning. Mercury poisoning is still present today, as there are still cases in the US, though it is not as common and there are better ways of treating it. Today, we will be discussing the history of this disease, examine the effects of mercury poisoning on the body, and lastly, discuss the cases of mercury poisoning in the modern day. On to my first point, the history of the Mad Hatter disease. The Mad Hatter disease is commonly just known as mercury poisoning. The name comes from the 18th century and was coined Mad Hatter because the disease commonly affected hat makers due to them using mercury in the process of making hats. From Helpline, hat makers would use mercurite nitride to act as a glue to keep the hats together. They also worked in poorly ventilated housing, leading them to inhaling the toxic mercury vapors. This disease also led to the common phrase, as mad as a hatter. Before it was even used as hat glue in the 18th centuries, doctors in the Middle Ages used mercury as a medicine to fight syphilis, as stated by the National Institute of Health. In fact, according to the American Council on Science and Health, in their article, A Little Mercurial History, quote, mercurous chloride, Hg2, Cl2, was commonly used by physicians some 500 years as standard therapy for almost every disease, end quote. Today, medical professionals do not use mercury in any type of medicine as stated by the National Library of Medicine because of mercury's toxicity. People in the medical profession do not use mercury as a miracle cure like they did some 100 years before. On to my second point of how mercury impacts the body. As mercury gets into the body, it has numerous amounts of effects. As stated by Mount Sinai in their article called Mercury, there are 3 types of mercury poisoning: elemental mercury, inorganic mercury, and organic mercury poisoning. Elemental mercury tends to be harmless if it is swallowed or touched, however it can do more damage if it is inhaled through the air. Breathing in a lot of elemental mercury, there tends to be a lot more instant symptoms, such as a metallic taste in the mouth, vomiting, difficulty breathing, a bad cough, or swollen and bleeding gums. If a large amount of mercury is inhaled, this could lead to a lot more permanent brain and lung damage. Elemental mercury is found in glass thermometers, fluorescent light bulbs, dental filling, and electrical switches. Inorganic mercury, in contrast with elemental mercury, is poisonous when it is swallowed and has symptoms including a burning stomach and throat and intense vomiting. When inorganic mercury enters the bloodstream, it attacks the kidney and brain and will cause permanent kidney damage, which leads to kidney failure. When a large amount of inorganic mercury is released into the bloodstream, it also leads to a large amount of blood loss, along with the symptoms as stated before. Inorganic mercury is found in batteries, some disinfectants, and in chemistry labs. The last type of poisoning is organic mercury poisoning. This type of poisoning is harmful if it is inhaled, consumed, or touched. However, it can take years to start showing symptoms of organic mercury poisoning. Some symptoms include numbness and pains in parts of the skin, uncontrollable shaking, inability to walk, blindness or other vision problems, memory problems, and seizures. If you are exposed to organic mercury poisoning while pregnant, it is likely the baby will be born with permanent brain damage. Organic mercury is found in older germ killers such as antiseptins and red mercurochrome, which is now banned by the FDA because it has mercury in it. It is also found in coal fumes and fish that contain methylene mercury. When someone is exposed to mercury, it is important to call for help. Then, once you reach the emergency room, doctors will check your vitals, do blood and urine tests, check x-rays, and electrocardiograms, which is when they check for electricity inside your chest. Then, depending on the type of mercury poisoning, will depend on the treatment. Like for elemental mercury, they use humidifiers and ventilators to get the mercury out of the lungs. For inorganic mercury, they use IV in the veins or charcoal to soak up the mercury from the stomach. And for organic mercury, there is a medicine called chestnut, which they use to remove the mercury from the blood, brain, and kidney. On the brain specifically, according to Medical News Today, mercury poisoning causes emotional, mental, and behavioral changes within the brain, leading people to believing those experiencing mercury poisoning have gone mad. On to my third and final point, mercury poisoning today. Today, the Mad Hatter disease is very uncommon, with, according to Healthline in 2013, only 24 out of the 1,300 cases of mercury poisoning in the U.S. ever caused major issues. This is because there have been efforts to reduce human contact to mercury. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the state in the U.S. with the most amount of cases of mercury poisoning is Florida, specifically in the Florida Bay. This is due to the large amount of seafood that contain mercury in it. Still, it is impossible to tell if a fish has mercury in it, as mercury has no taste, smell, or look and cannot be cooked off or cut off. Though it is difficult to determine if a fish has mercury in it, there are ways to avoid risking it. According to the NRDC, some species of fish have a large amount of mercury in them, such as marlins, sharks, swordfish, tilefish, ahi tuna, and big eye tuna. If you want to avoid even risking poisoning, avoid these types of fish, as well as limiting your tuna intake. Tuna is the most common source of mercury poisoning. Stick to a bit less than 2 servings of tuna a week because of the large amount of mercury in tuna. Though these foods do contain mercury in them, it is safe to eat them in moderation unless you are pregnant, nursing, or a child under the years of 6. This is due to the impact mercury has on the brain, specifically in the development of a child. Fish aren't the only thing to have mercury in them in the modern day, though. According to the Minnesota Department of Health, from their article from 2021, there is still a large number of skin lightening products that contain a large number of mercury in them. Some examples tested by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency are rice milk whitening cream, avocado night cream, and lemon herbal whitening cream. From the New York City Health website, when using these products on your face, the mercury can get into your skin, causing brain, nervous system, and kidney damage. To the skin specifically, it will cause rashes and blotchy spots of gray all over your face. Many of these products are not domestic products, but that does not mean there isn't a risk of these products being in the stores near you. To prevent using mercury on your face, it is important to look at the ingredient label for anything labeled HG, the symbol for mercury, or the word mercury. Overall, in this speech, we discussed what the Mad Hatter disease is, how it led to the common phrase, as mad as a hatter, and the overbearing amount of history surrounding the name of the disease. Then we discussed how mercury poisoning affects the body and the different types of mercury poisoning, as well as the treatment options. And lastly, we talked about the main cases of mercury poisoning in the modern day. The Mad Hatter disease was famous for being what the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland was based off. Now we went over what the actual Mad Hatter disease is.
How many of you guys have listened to a true crime podcast or even read a few cases about an unsolved murder? At least everyone here in this room has at least listened to true crime once in their life. Maybe you were so fascinated you wanted to learn more, or you didn't even like it that much. You might have enjoyed it because you related to some of the sad upbringing that the killer went through, or you were just so curious about why they did what they did. You probably even heard so much true crime, you're not even shocked, surprised, or even feel that eerie feeling you used to feel when you first learned about these terrible things. According to Law Practitioner, more than 50% of Americans enjoy true crime. Let's crack open this case and open up our suitcase to solve this mystery of why people like true crime. One of the reasons why people like true crime is the mystery behind it. According to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, people like true crime because of the thrill of solving it along a speaker, if you're listening to a podcast, or the events that occur till the very end where they find who the killer was, or where there's no killer, like the Zodiac Killer. Not only that, but you may also collect your own clues to try to make up a reason or find a solution to why the murderer did what they did. And then you get to know what they did at the end of the podcast. People like the feeling they get from learning about things they don't even know happened, and the feeling of fear that these things are real and could even possibly happen to them. More than 56% of people are scared of serial killers, and according to New York Times, without knowing, we pass by 36 murderers in our lifetime. True crime also implies to people's sense of justice, rights, and wrongs. They also get to learn more about the legal system. It's a form of entertainment, a form where people can escape reality and find themselves into mystery. Let's flip through our files and find the second reason why people are obsessed with true crime. Fans are obsessed with maybe even the serial killer. Loving mystery and enjoying the thrill of true crime is fascinating, but maybe fans get too fascinated about the killer's actions and motives. Some fans have sent gifts to serial killers in prison. Minor UK News, a news outlet, has reported that Jeffrey Dahmer and Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, were sent letters, gifts, money, and even inappropriate images of women themselves, and a bunch of other gifts by women. Other serial killers have also been sent similar things. Like Ted Bundy, a serial killer who mostly targeted women, was sent love letters and even marriage proposals by other women. Despite their gruesome actions that these people have committed, many women are attracted to them or want to find something deeper of why they did these certain actions. Many of these women might have something called hyperophilia. American Psychology Association defines hyperophilia as, quote, sexual interest and attraction to those who commit crimes. In some cases, this might be directed towards people in prison for various types of criminal activity, end quote. Not only this, but maybe some of these women also may suffer from childhood abuse. Childhood abuse or trauma can change your perspective of love and what love is supposed to look like. According to the Carbon or Agorization, being abused in our childhood can change our whole perspective in love, and we may unconsciously find someone who may be toxic or abusive, and we won't notice it since we normalized it so much. Some of these women who seek out serial killers and might even fall in love with them might also try to get with them to, quote-unquote, fix them, or find some strange power dynamic, finding someone who may resemble their abuser behind bars. People romanticize murders, but this doesn't only stop at real life, but also fiction. We all probably heard about creepypastas while we were younger. Creepypastas are scary stories made up by people online. Most of these stories are horror stories where we go on and there's a person explaining a story how a person became a serial killer, like Jeff the Killer, or we explore a mystery where obviously a killer is in. Now, you may have heard of Slender Man. Slender Man has been actually connected to two girls being influenced to kill their friend, Peyton. Peyton, their friend, was killed by Morgan and Alyssa after they read the creepypasta Slender Man. They stabbed her in the forest and ran away. Later, when the police investigated them, they claimed that Slender Man made them kill Peyton to be able to live alongside him. Now, let's go through our last point. And let's go through our last point and see one of the other reasons why people might like true crime. Copycat killers. The idea of true crime isn't modern. It's always been in history. Fascination doesn't only stop at love, but also trying to intimidate killers. We all heard of Jack the Ripper. He is also known as the White Chaplain Murderer and was an unidentified murderer around 1888 who killed prostitutes. But did you know he also had a copycat in 2008 who tried to imitate him? According to Daily Mail, a news outlet in the UK reports that Derek Brown was arrested for killing 2 women near the White Chaplain area, just like Jack the Ripper. Police later went into his apartment and found books about serial killers. Connections were made, and the suspect, Derek Brown, was trying to impersonate Jack the Ripper. Andrew Mark Twitchen is another copycat killer who tried to impersonate a fictional character known as Derek Morgan. Derek Morgan is a serial killer who only kills other people who are terrible, but Mark Twitchen didn't kill anyone who was terrible. He killed an innocent man. From an article by CBS News, Mark pretended to be a woman online and catfished men to be able to kill them. His first attempt was unsuccessful, but his second attempt, he killed an innocent man, Johnny. There are so many copycats that were inspired by people being so fascinated by other killers that they attempted to impersonate them. Many of these copycats may have never been caught and were just assumed to be the killers returning, and they still might be out there. Overall, in the speech, we discussed how people's love of thrill of true crime, how some people might go overboard from obsession, and how serial killers, and why this occurs, and how this can go beyond just fascination and go into real life, and how people can try to intimidate others. Let's close our suitcase and take our molecule off to end this case.
And that concludes our 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet presentations on YourLiveEvent.com and the Inform Finals presented by Bloomfield Enterprises of Hillsboro. Bloomfield Enterprises of Hillsboro, supporter of athletics and activities at Hillsboro High School. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again to all of our sponsors. And again, if you want to go back and watch the Persuade Final or the extemp and impromptu preliminary rounds, there will be posted shortly here on YourLiveEvent.com and our Your Live Event YouTube page. For all of us here at YourLiveEvent.com, James Martin saying, speech bands, show some pride.